Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and the Kevin Huberis. In this episode, we'll be diving into the LA Home Series event, as well as going into the future to give our Dallas predictions for that event that will be happening. Well, I guess I shouldn't say event, since with the news of the CDL, it seems most, if not all, of the events this year are canceled. However, they will be continuing online. So, barring that the format isn't changing for online, we'll be giving our predictions for the Dallas matches that would be happening, as well as giving our power rankings for the teams. We'll be dividing them up into categories based on kind of the performances that we have seen so far. But jumping right into the LA homestand event, where we saw some interesting roster moves that I know I didn't see coming. One being the LA Gorillas. They subbed out 3 of their players for Blast, Sprat, and Vivid. So they took out Ace, who I believe that was the right decision. I think taking out Ace was the right decision for a younger player with more slaying power, since he was vastly underperforming in their matches. As well as we did see Lacefield and Saints being taken out of the roster. Those are 2 bit more interesting ones. And then for the Florida Mutineers, we didn't see Pristini at this event. I think that's very unfortunate for some of your predictions, so to say, since you were very high on Florida. And we saw Farrow coming in due to potential mental health reasons with Pristini. So that was a very last minute sub. And barring that, I would say Farrow did pretty good, but we'll dive more into that. That was it for kind of the roster changes that we did see. However, we did see some standout performances from the Rocker and from LA Optic. And so that's kind of a rundown of some of the impressive or interesting things that we saw from the event. And so now I'd like to start off with the first match that we saw, which was that new Mutineers lineup versus the Atlanta FaZe. And both of us had this going in the way of, I believe, Atlanta. Yes, but I had Atlanta 3-1 over the Florida Mutineers. You had Atlanta 3-2 over the Mutineers. However, both of us thought Pristine would be playing, so a bit different. The series was a 3-0 for the Atlanta FaZe. The hard point was relatively close, a 250 to a 220. However, the S&D and the Gunrunner domination were not close at all, and I feel like that kind of is what you would expect when you kind of had this last minute substitution. The hard point maybe being the easier game mode for you to sub in kind of any player and perform up to somewhat of what you would expect without a sub. However, the S&D and the domination with a lot more kind of probably tactical play involved and teamwork involved in those game modes, having more of a blowout is I would say probably a bit more expected in those. And I do want to say Pharaoh didn't look bad at on this Florida Mutineers roster, at least in the Atlanta FaZe series. I would say he put up a pretty good performance, and honestly, how he performed, I would say he kind of earned his right to be a substitute for the Mutineers or for any team really. Honestly, he looked relatively decent, I would say, throughout the event, and definitely better than some of the performance we've seen from some of the players in the league. And I imagine we'll see Florida signing Farrow, since their only substitute is Maniac, who they brought on for content, who
Yeah, I was
hasn't
about
even
to
been
say.
doing content. So it's like, why the hell are you even on this team? They're just burning cash.
They
And there's a couple people like that in the league currently. But yeah, can they just drop Maniac and pick up Farrow? I feel like that would make a lot of sense, especially if we're going to see Pristini not at maybe some more events, barring recovery or feeling better from his illness.
so I don't think that he's going to be out for a very long extended period of time.
Yeah, yeah.
That being
I don't,
said,
I don't, I don't think so either. However, you don't want kind of this situation to happen again, where 2 days before an event, you're bringing in a new player that into a completely new environment. And I do think Farrow could probably maybe replace some of the players on this team if they don't increase their performance. You could probably put him in for Havoc maybe, or for Frosty. Havoc's obviously looked pretty good, I would say, in the S&Ds, and he looked good in the hard point at this event. But if we look back at like the prior event in Atlanta, he did not look very good in the hard points, whereas Farrell looked pretty decent throughout kind of all the game modes really for being thrown into this new environment.
I think the biggest thing with this, and yeah, I was really high on the Florida Mutineers because I think the Pristini's probably a top 3 player in A right now.
Top 3 player,
Top 3, yeah.
like
So
overall.
yes.
Okay, that's very high
So
praise.
I think he deserves it. I think he's led this team to, be a not even a wild card, to be a contender, and I think that, that he brings a lot to that team. Obviously, like a last minute change is going to affect your team chemistry, your rosters, all this stuff, especially a guy who, while he does have, CWL experience, he has been playing with pros at a high level. He hasn't been playing in lands with pros at all this season, where you've seen a lot of these teams obviously perform at these higher level events. So there's a lot of factors that go into how I think Florida kind of blew this event. But I mean, I also don't think that they're the only ones that blew this event, but they had at least a pretty reasonable excuse to. As far as signing Farrow and keeping him on, I think that's a fairly good idea. I mean, obviously you want subs and everything, and I also agree that Havoc and Frostier could potentially be problems down the road that Pharaoh could replace. That being said, I mean, I was hoping for at least a bit better performance from Caesar Skies or Mox. Either of them would have been, if they could
Wait,
have.
Skies was nasty this event.
No, don't get me wrong. Skies was great this event, but he could not carry this team.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I think
He
that.
definitely couldn't carry the team, but the performance he put up was stellar. Honestly, I'm not putting
Oh
the
no, I'm not
reasoning
putting the
this
blame on
team
Skies. What
lost.
I'm saying is
Yeah,
is that there needed to be more, and there's only 2 guys that could have really done it. I don't think Farrell was in a
yeah,
position to step up into Pristini's spot. I think Skies played like a top 5 player at this event. He played out of his mind, but I mean, Skies also has been performing consistently throughout this entire season, and he's had Pristini on his team, whereas you take a downgrade with Farrow. I mean, even if Farrow is just as straight of a shooter as Pristini and has the same amount of movement, which I don't think he does, he doesn't have that chemistry that Pristini has been building with the Florida Mutineers roster. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that FaZe won this after all of it was said and done, and it's just kind of disappointing to see that the Florida Mutineers really lost a valuable player, and this is a lot of steam that they're going to lose, a lot of wind out of their sails, so to speak, because they were kind of on a hot streak.
yeah. It's definitely a very unfortunate scenario, and maybe I'm not sure. I believe Farrow's more of a flex player. Maybe you want to sub him in for Mox, who has been underperforming quite a lot so far this split. Maybe that would be better fit for him. I'm not too sure. Either him or Mox honestly haven't looked too hot throughout the season. However, it'd be interesting to see how this team would work if you removed that duo and kind of the chemistry that they've built up through Gen G and now carrying it into this Florida Mutineers team.
Yeah.
But moving, sorry,
No,
what
you're
you want
good.
to say something?
No. I think that's another good point is the whole chemistry thing from Gen G onwards.
Moving on to our next match, we did see the Minnesota Rocker versus the Seattle Surge. The Minnesota Rocker took this 3-1 over the Surge. I predicted that Seattle would take it 3-2. However, I did say in the prior podcast that if I was to bet any money on it, I would say Minnesota would take it 3-1, and that they did. Interestingly enough, the game mode that the Surge did take was the S&D. So I'm not sure if their S&D's now their strongest game mode or if that's just Minnesota's weakest game mode. And the first hard point was pretty close. It was a 250 to a 235. But after that, the rest of the series outside of that S&D that Seattle took, it was very rocker favored. And so I want to pose the question: if do you think Pander put in enough of a performance for them to stick with him on the starting roster? It should be very interesting. I know there was kind of all that talk about how Octane didn't want Enabled on the team really after his poor performances. However, I do know simply from kind of Joey Nubsy and his history with kind of Gen G, he's more than willing to sub in players to see if it will benefit the roster. There were multiple times with that Gen G roster where Nagafin was subbed out and Spacely came in, maybe for like a weekend or something. And then the next weekend, Spacely was gone again. And he's one of the only real coaches to kind of actually use the substitute, I would say, in a relatively effective way. Like there's probably obviously better ways you can use it, but I remember just last year he was actually using the substitute for its purpose, and everyone was like, "What is going on? This is so weird. You actually use a substitute?" So
I think
I don't know. I don't know if this could evolve into something like that, since it did seem to light a fire under Enable, and so
I think the
maybe
problem
we see
is
him come in.
it's it's less about what Enable's going to do to be on the team. Once you have one of the more influential players on your team, and arguably the best player on the team, Octane, say, I don't really want him right now, there's got to be that's kind of got to hurt going from that 100 Thieves roster that was really successful last year and Enable being a huge part of that to now saying, hey, no, we don't think you're a part of it right now. Like that kind of shunning could really, really affect Enable, and whenever he comes back, if he would come back, might cause some tension like we saw in Optic during World War II. We'll see. I could see this going, both ways, but right now I still am not impressed with Seattle. They're not the worst team in CDL, but they have enough big names on that team that they could definitely be a lot better. But yeah, I mean, Rocker's actually a really good team. This event definitely showed that Rocker is a very, very good team.
Yep. And I don't know if I want to still chalk it up, because I know I said that Seattle Surge would definitely struggle at the beginning of the year. I knew that for a fact, that this team would struggle at the beginning of the year, simply because you have 4 players that are incredibly similar, and then you just have Octane. So I do think Pander coming in as like another strong AR player is a good look for them. However, I honestly do think that this team just needs time, but I don't know if all the players on it are willing to give the team time. I know Apathy is, I know potentially maybe Karma is. However, Slacked and Octane definitely are not players I would consider patient in
Yeah, I wouldn't.
letting a team evolve and come to form.
Funny
So
enough that
it
the main AR is not a patient player because Octane definitely isn't. And I mean, if they don't start performing, I could definitely see some roster mania happening and Octane ending up on a team that is desperate for an AR. So
it's not too bad. I don't want to keep on saying it's not too bad for Seattle, since they definitely need to start picking up some W's, since I believe they only have 20 points currently in the league, which isn't really a good look. However, it was against Minnesota, and Minnesota has shown to be a good team over these past 2 events that we have seen.
yes.
So there is that.
Yeah.
Moving on to our third match, we saw the Dallas Empire versus the New York Subliners. And oh boy, Happy sucks. Holy cow. Like, he came in, we don't know how much time he's had to play the game, first off. He probably didn't get too much practice with the team, and he was atrocious. And anyone could have predicted that he would have been absolutely atrocious. So why are we putting in Happy, who we haven't seen anything out of for like the past 4 years, not putting in Sensor, or even not? Why would you like just keep Zero? They picked up a new player, Mac, I believe, and maybe they're going to be putting him into the roster. We're not going to be seeing them at, I believe, 3 events. Yeah,
Uh,
New York's not at Dallas. They're at Chicago. So they could have waited to make this change. They didn't need to make it yet. They could have waited this event, see how it goes, and maybe they get at least 1 win.
yeah,
Maybe they just
this
at
was a
least get 10 points. And they did pick up a map. They picked up the first hard point against Dallas. However, every single person on New York absolutely had to show up for them to even squeak out that win. It was 250 to 219.
yeah, that was
And they were popping off. I'm going to bring up the kill differential really quick for that. It was, they outslayed by 24 kills, and they only won by 31 points. Everyone on the team was positive outside of Happy, who was at a 0.69 in that hard point. Overall, during the event, his overall KD was a 0.68. A 0.68. He was worse than Aches and JCap. Like, what are you doing, New York? please explain. Like, give us a reasoning not to just chalk you guys up and just like get rid of you from this entire season. You're
Yeah,
the only team with 10 points. The only team. And it doesn't look like you're going to get any better by subbing in Mac or Sensor. Like, there's a huge issue with this team that needs to be fixed.
yeah, the happy sub, I genuinely don't understand. I never understood. Zero's a perfectly fine player. They do need to make changes, but they don't need to be putting in a guy who's been, I thought, was retired from Pro COD. Like, whenever they said Happy was the guy replacing Zero, I was like, wait, hold on a second. That sounds familiar. Like, that's what I had to do whenever they announced Happy was coming in. And then he did exactly what I thought, which was absolutely nothing. I didn't think he was going to be worse than, the absolute worst Call of Duty player in CDL, but oh my god, that was pitiful. Honestly, like, yeah, New York is I I think I had him really high ranked in the beginning of the season, and now I'd struggle to even rank them at all. Yeah, 'cause I don't want to. They don't want to put the time into and the effort in to put together a good team. Then I don't want to put in the effort of talking about them.
You
Dallas
look at
did
the
fine.
team,
Dallas
they have a good team. Like, you look at the players and you're like, oh, that's a good team. I could see them
on
being
paper.
top 5, top 6. So what's the issue? Eh, I really do want to know, and I really hope they fix it since I had such high hopes for this team. And I think we both did. Like, at least I thought they would be a top 5 team, and they're clearly not. And like, another stat. Here's another stat, just to show you how bad Happy is, because I just want to keep dogging this guy because I have no clue why they subbed him in. Absurd, absolutely. I just true engagement success. So true engagement success is a percentage of engagements that end in kills or assists. Happy in domination, his true engagement success was at 38%.
Oh gosh, 38
38%.
means that he just died twice, and then he would occasionally get an assist. Sometimes he would
His
get a kill.
engagements per minute, was a 1.3.
What?
A 1.3 in domination. So yeah,
Like the
I
players
don't
got
know
to
what
know
New
at that
York is
point.
doing.
The players got to
I
know
don't
at that
know.
point.
Has he even played domination? He wasn't around when domination was a game type. The last game domination was a game type was Ghosts.
I mean, you'd
And
hope
I
that.
didn't hear I didn't hear of Happy's name. I know he's been around a while, but I don't think he was relevant until AW and Black Ops 3, and then even then he wasn't super relevant, and then he just vanished. I believe that was probably because of the 18 plus rule or something, but still, I mean, you had all these other players come out that got quote unquote screwed over by the 18 plus rule, and they're doing fine. So I don't know what he was doing all this time, but
I
clearly it was just giving Lamar and the rest of New York high fives and backpacks, because that's the only reason I can think he's on this roster. Moving on though to good job Dallas. Good job Dallas. I will say that before we move
yeah, I was
on.
about to say like the only
Solid win.
we didn't talk about Dallas at all, but I mean Dallas did fine this tournament, so we're gonna have many other times to talk about Dallas.
Yeah. Our fourth match, it was the battle for LA. It was Optic Gaming LA versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And this was a lot closer of a series than I would have thought. I did think that Optic Gaming was the better team. They did come out with the win. However, it was an incredibly close series. Both of us said OGLA was going to take it 3-1. They took it 3-2. And we see that 3-2, and it seems very close. And I did say it was very close. However, when I look at the first two maps, it was 250 to 234 and 6-5 in the S&D. So two very close games there. But then the rest of the series, it was kind of just Optic Gaming turned on the afterburners and was like, we are not losing to the Guerrillas, who just subbed in 3 players and barely got any practice in. And then they just destroyed them for the next 3.
Yeah,
So I imagine those first 2 losses were probably because Optic was just confused as to what the Gorillas were doing on the map because they had brought in 3 new players, and so they're just kind of like, what is going on here? Slasher got confused. You need Pac-Man to just calm him down, maybe give him some herbal tea and be like, yeah, they're weird. Just play normal. And then they
Maybe.
won.
I mean, I'd like to say that, maybe the Gorillas are not a bad team. They're doing the right decision, like they're making the right decisions as far as personnel. But I think this is kind of a one-off. Optic is starting
Yeah.
to look better at least, so I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands of fanboys out there, squealing with excitement now that Optic is looking like not a completely failure of a team. So
Yeah, they looked like honestly, I think them looking as good as they did this event was the worst thing that could have happened to them. And the reasoning B is it gives them validation to not make a roster change when they clearly need one.
also
This
true.
team, if they stick together, I do not think they will break into the top 6. I don't see it happening. I think the teams that fill up the top 6 of the league would just demolish them. There might be some close series in there, but I don't ever see this Optic Gaming roster breaking into there. And the reason being is JCap. The rest of the team looked good. The rest of the team was above a 1.0. Overall at the event, Slasher was at a 1.3, Dashy a 1.11, TJ Halley a 1.11. Good improved performance from him. Kenny was at even at a 1.00. JCap 0.82. So still, I would love to see JCap get subbed out for a better player. I think if Enable isn't getting brought back into that Seattle starting lineup, they need to make a hard play to pick him up onto this roster.
I
I
100
think
I 100% agree with that. I think Enable, if I was gonna start making roster changes right now, if Enable gets released by Seattle, which I don't think it's smart, but I'm not sure how trades work necessarily in CDL. It's kind of a wild wild west, and there's also not a whole lot of, I guess, direction for that currently since this is the first year. But if I was Optic, I would throw however much money I had at Enable because I think that there's a ton of chemistry that goes well in that, and that would be the exact move that you make. At least if somebody's pulling a .82, you'd rather have it be Enable, who's going to bring better communication, better thumbs, probably a lot more assists. Do you think that Enable is 100% a better player than JCap? And I think that if I was going to shop around as any team right now, I think Optic Gaming, OGLA needs a guy like Enable on their team. I
and
I don't see
like
many other teams that he fits well in.
yeah, I think it's fine for JCap to go a 0.82 if everyone is performing at the level that they were. Like obviously the role change with Slasher and Dashy did wonders for this roster, at least currently. However, TJ, I honestly would consider him a relatively inconsistent player in kind of when he is performing. And so if you have him being relatively inconsistent, I don't think JCap can consistently be at a 0.82. Honestly, the reason why this team did so well this weekend is because you had 4 players above a 1.0. And the one thing that this team does do really well, and I mean potentially the best in the league, is their true engagement success. Every single player on this team is way up there in that category. It's honestly quite impressive. I don't know what the max true engagement success is. I believe it's around a 64%. The lowest on their team is a 56, which
JCap.
is which is JCap, yes, but that's quite good. Like that's really good across the team to have those kind of percentages for that stat, which I think is an incredibly important stat and can. I'm so glad this got added. I believe this is a new stat that Easy Mac is throwing on there. I believe this is an incredibly important statistic in showing teamwork and how good teams are working together and positioning themselves on the map, or how well your subs are positioning, so that if they go in and they die, that the AR or whoever's behind them can pick up that trade. And so I think for that reason, like Optic looks really good, at least in that category. However, I do still think they need to make a trade, and that's
It,
why this win could potentially really ruin this team in the long run. Moving on to our fifth match, we saw the Dallas Empire versus the Atlanta FaZe. Both of us, I believe, predicting this going to Atlanta FaZe. However, I thought it was going to be a much closer series. We both thought it would be a much closer series. We both said it was going to be a 3-2 for Atlanta over Dallas. However, it was a 3-0. And the hard point and the domination were quite close. It was a 250 to a 241 for the hard point, and a 249 or a 149 to a 139 in the domination. So quite close, I would say, in those aspects. So definitely could have gone maybe to at least a game four, I would say, if Dallas was able to squeak out that win in the hard point. S&D, it was a 6-3, so I would say relatively comfortable for FaZe in that aspect. So I don't really have much more to say on this. I think FaZe has just been looking really good. Dallas, I would say, looking at this, that they've improved a bit, and we'll definitely see that throughout the weekend since they did win the LA event in the end. Spoiler. But unless you have anything to kind of add on to this, I think we're good to probably move on to that Florida Mutineers versus New York Subliners match.
I will say that this is the one thing I will say. This was the game that I decided that I hate domination as a game type in CDL, and it was just, I mean, just let the score speak for itself. It was really boring.
You didn't like it?
Oh, I hated it.
I mean, it was relatively close.
It was close, but I
So
mean, it
isn't that
was
usually when they're kind of more exciting?
I I could not find any enjoyment in this game. That
What
specific game. I
what game mode would you like to see instead of Dom? Since I think that is a decent talking point. I mean, we've seen uplink, we've seen control, capture the flag, Dom now, and then blitz.
um
And I loved blitz, to be honest. I don't know why, but I really like that game type. And so I
I
would
think
find it
you're alone in that, but
I know I'm quite alone in that. But you can't do uplink, obviously. It's not a jetpack game. That's the best one. I would agree that that's the best one,
yes.
but it's not a jetpack game, so you can't do that.
Nope.
Capture the flag, I've found it to be more boring, I would say, at times, because it's pretty much whoever caps first wins. Because if you get the flag, everyone else just camps, and then you have these incredibly long, boring matches. And so maybe they want to do a golden goal rule where the first team to cap wins, and then you flip sides and they start the timer from how much like how long it took the other team to cap a flag. Maybe actually
I
they wouldn't
think
want to do that because then like say it stalls out for 20 minutes, no team's going to want to cap the flag because then the other team has 20 minutes to cap it. So
I
and then
think
and blitz is kind of similar to capture the flag except it's a little bit more aggressive, I would say, in kind of its pacing, which might work out since this seems to be, I'm not going to say a slower game, but like it takes a long time to run across the map. Uh, at least that's like what the pros are saying. I don't think it takes super long, but the maps we have are
they're big.
larger
They just
maps than
feel
what we've had in the past.
big. Not to
Yeah.
mention
So like,
you have to run around the map in a specific way. You know, it's not as much as,
yeah,
oh, let me just fly across the map real quick. Let me, use my grapple gun and, shoot myself across the map
yeah,
so I can slide cancel all over these kids.
yeah,
It is a lot longer. You have to approach every corner a different way. You have to, bunny hop and slide cancel all over the place like you're cracked out of your mind all the time. You have your AR guys that don't even know it, three-quarters of the map looks like because they just have their power spots and that's it. I will say though that I think you're getting onto the point of what I'm trying to make about map 3 is or about the third game type is that we can't figure it out yet and the only things that have worked have been like title specific and they didn't even work. Like they weren't even the most ideal of the game types. It sucks that we've gone back. I wouldn't say it sucks. It's refreshing. I liked it whenever we went from jetpacks back to boots on the ground, but pretty obvious that uplink was the best, fresh, and felt
yeah,
really really cool. But I mean, like boots on the ground just needs their like griff ball or something. They need that like fun game type that's gonna be exciting to watch. And I mean, I'm Not saying that CTF needs to be the game type. I really don't think there's a third game type that you can put in this, and I'm just gonna have to suffer through Dom for the rest of the season. But to let people know, to let Activision and IW and everybody involved with Call of Duty know that like third game type, something needs to happen because I'm sick and tired of these terrible boots on the ground third game types. They're all garbage and they all just like figure something out or just switch back to jetpacks.
Yeah. I would say past CTS were probably exciting, like Black Ops 2 era.
Everything in
And I
Black
mean,
Ops 2.
I enjoyed Blitz for the most part. I would like to see it in a game simply to kind of see how it plays and kind of these new titles. I would say Uplink obviously was the best. However, you did still have kind of those blowout games. However, that's somewhat unavoidable. I mean, you look at basketball, it's kind of the same thing. A team might be up 40 points in the first half or something, and the other team doesn't have too much of a chance of coming back. Obviously, they can because there's plenty of time left, but you do feel a little saddened. And I honestly wouldn't mind seeing Control. I know Control got a lot of crap when we were playing it last year. However, I don't think it's a bad game mode, to be honest.
Control actually would be better if it came out in this game than it did in Black Ops 4. The problem with Control in Black Ops 4 was just it was so quick. You could get across the map so quickly. So it was pretty
Yeah.
easy to start pinching people and spawns and spawn trapping. That was something that was the strat. Like, all right, on defense, you just got to press them, press them, press them. Don't even guard bombs or anything like that, and then just get them to the point where they're spawn trapped. And this game, I think that you would have a very hard time doing that. I think there's plenty of good spots on the map. There's some maps that you wouldn't be able to do that at all, but I think there's enough maps that you could make that work, and it would actually be kind of fun. It would kind of feel like a weird variant of Search and Destroy. So
Yeah. And I don't really know kind of if there's any other game modes. I know you have a lot of other party game modes. I know Halo, they do TDM for one of their competitive game types. So if they really want to get the casual community involved in esports, that's what you'd go with, not domination.
yeah,
And
I
that
mean,
honestly might not be terrible. I would be interested to see it. I would be interested to give other things a try. I don't think we gave enough game types to try. Like there's headquarters, you could try that maybe. TDM, as I said, like just try things and then get the opinions of the pros.
I
Like
like the idea.
literally try every game mode,
I like
every
the
game mode.
idea
I think they
of
just tried like they didn't even have CTF in first, so they
no.
just defaulted to Dom.
Well, there
So
was
they
a
didn't.
there was a
It appears
discussion.
they didn't even try other things, but
There was a discussion for
maybe
the
there was
thing.
a discussion.
I think
Yeah.
I think what should have happened was you should have played hard point search, and if it goes to game 5, the two best players go against each other from each team in a 2v2 gunfight, and that's your game 5. I think that would be pretty clutch, and that would be really really fun to watch. It would almost be like a shootout, in like hockey or anything like that, where you just have such a vastly different game to decide the real winner. And I think that would be a lot of fun to watch. I think gunfight's fun anyway.
It would be fun to watch competitively. I don't know, like I'm talking about integrity. I don't know how like consistent it would be. I think you would because you get random guns and I don't know. It'd be very interesting. I mean, from a spectator's perspective, it'd be great. From a competitor's perspective, they would absolutely
They
hate
would
it.
try to close out games. We'd see a lot of 3-1s. but
Yeah, you definitely see people really trying to close out games. That's for sure.
I
Uh,
mean, I think it also, I think it's also kind of interesting. It doesn't punish teams for having players like JCap on their roster or Happy on their roster. You know, with a game 5 on the line, you could say, all right, your two best players, my two best players, let's go. And you could do a variety of
Honestly, at
things.
that point, I wouldn't even use any players for my starting five. I would have two subs that all they do all day, every day, is play gunfight.
Like Sensor, gotcha.
No, Sensor plays tens.
Oh, he's trying to get into tens, but yeah, I mean, you could,
I
and,
mean,
and
he's
that
getting into
and
most tens,
that'd
or
be
at
kind of
least a good.
cool to see, two players just come in off the bench to play
Bro, if that's
specifically
the case,
gunfights.
Huntsman smoking everyone.
Yeah,
Not a
probably.
chance. Game 5, they ain't losing. They are not losing. Jordan General, whoo. Did you see the clip what he did to Pharaoh?
Yeah, that was pretty dirty. But
Oh
I mean,
man.
I think
Or
that would be,
fellow. My bad,
yeah,
fellow.
fellow, not Pharaoh. No, but that was still really gross. Yeah. Anyway, man, we went on a tangent about one that we didn't even want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll probably pick up the pace a little bit since I think we've dogged on New York enough. We talked about Florida and their substitution. So that is the next match. It's Florida versus the New York Subliners. Florida took it 3-1 over New York. First hard point was close. It was a 250 to 222. New York took the S&D. It was 6-5. And then the other two game modes, the Hackney Dom and the Hackney hard point, went handedly in the Mutineers' favor. So those were New York's two matches. They're out, and yeah, they need to fix some things. New York advance or Florida advances.
Yeah,
And
New York sucks. Florida's marginally better without their best player. You know, they were doomed from the start of this tournament. So
yep. Moving on to our seventh match of the day, it was the Minnesota Rocker versus Optic Gaming LA. And Optic Gaming took this 3-0 over the Rocker. This is probably the biggest upset, I would say, of the tournament. Rocker's been looking like a very solid, consistent team since probably their showing at Minnesota, where they did go 2-0, but their first match against the Gorillas has an asterisk next to it, I would say. Their match against Toronto looked good, and then they looked pretty good at Atlanta. And they had looked good starting in this LA homestand. However, I don't know what it was. Maybe the Rocker was just like, you know what? We're probably going to end up playing Atlanta at some point throughout this weekend. We're literally only going to pair for Seattle and Atlanta, and then we're not going to look up anything on Optic or the Gorillas, since we know for a fact that we can beat them because they're crap.
I
I
think
don't
that
know if that's like what their mindset
I
was
think that's
going
what it
into
was.
this,
I think
because it just seems like they were underprepared
that's
for
exactly
this
what I
for
feel
this
like.
match.
I think that Optic came in and kind of shocked them, and they just after the first two losses, Optic had enough steam, and Minnesota was just kind of like, I mean, we lose, we lose. So I've definitely heard the theory that they threw this so that way they didn't have to wouldn't have to worry about playing phase off the gates.
If
Maybe they felt like,
no, if they lost this, they would have to play phase off the gates because they would be
oh
the
yeah,
second
that's
seed.
right.
Yeah, like
Uh,
this is a match you don't really want to lose unless you think you favor a matchup against phase a lot more than you would Dallas. So
oh,
I
I guess.
imagine, I mean, they looked really good against FaZe at Atlanta. So maybe they're like, okay, we know what we did wrong. We're only going to prep for Atlanta. We're not going to worry about these other teams. We think we can beat them.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I see what you're
And
saying now.
I honestly think they didn't prepare for Optic or the Gorillas like at all. That's simply like what it looks like and kind of what I'm assuming based off of kind of how Optic looked against the other teams that they played.
I mean, you do have to give credit to Optic, even though they played out of their minds. Well, four of them played out of their minds this tournament, and then one just was
He did
along for
what
the
he had
ride.
to do.
He was along for the ride.
I would
Um,
say JCap did his job this tournament. He did his job.
yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, or a fair assessment of what JCap was doing. I mean, watching the games, you definitely see him like moving around, staying on the points, doing other stuff, utility stuff. Yeah, he can't win gunfights, but
The
anybody can
gunfights he
stand on a
does
point.
lose or he is involved in, they're at least leading to assists the majority of the time, and he's playing the objective for the most part. So
Yeah, he's at least watching a
yeah.
lane or something like that, or maybe like, pushing a lane so that way he can be the first guy in a series of trades or something to that effect. Like, there's plenty of stuff that you can do with a guy like that. It's just, I mean,
There are better players than him that can do what he does.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if somebody's having an off game or something, literally anybody's having an off game on Optic besides JCap, they just lose. They default lose. I mean, TJ Haley has a bad game. Oh, well, Optic loses. You know, Slasher has a bad game. Oh, well, Optic loses. Kenny has a bad game. Oh, well, Optic loses. Like, literally anybody on that team has a subpar game, then they're done. That's just how it goes. That's what
Yeah.
happens. You need,
And maybe this matchup was also just a bit of Optic got that first win. They needed their first win, and then they kicked it up a notch. They got some confidence. They got a groove, And there is something to getting that first win. There's a change in the mindset. I mean, if you're losing all the time, you kind of are stuck in this losing mindset. It's almost kind of like, well, here we go again. Oh, we're up 50 points, but I don't know, man. We've been up 50 points before. We're just going to lose again, I guess. And it's not even like consciously you think that, it's subconsciously that losing, it's not even like a losing mentality. It's subconscious losing when you've just gotten like accustomed to it, I would say, maybe.
Yeah, people get. I mean, we could say haha funny tweet to Ninja all day, but I mean he does have a point. Like if you're used to losing, you're saying all right, well I'm fine with this. This is okay. You're gonna normalize it, and that's never behavior that you want to do when you're trying to compete. You always want to be learning. You never want to say like a loss was just a loss. You always want to say like a loss was like a learning experience or something
Yeah,
to that effect, and you want to come back better from it. And
yeah,
Optic hasn't been doing that until recently, and this tournament I think will give them confidence moving forward. They still need to get rid of JCap.
yeah. Or at least pick up a new player to sub him out. Maybe not get rid of him entirely, just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Aches goes to Optic.
No, 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 no. That will never. You think Aches and Slasher on the same team?
I
Hell no. Hell no. That would not happen
I think
ever, dude.
I think that's the sign of the apocalypse if Aches gets picked up on Optic. Like
Yeah.
there was
Or
one
Aches gets on
player.
a team with Slasher.
Yeah,
Or Aches just gets
or
on a team.
why not both? Yeah, Aches getting on a team now at this point is a sign of like some team is really desperate at that point.
It was literally him getting on a team was his last great heist.
Like Florida was like, oh shit, we need to find a player right away. And Aches is like, hey guys, I'm done on the Gorillas, and they're like, all right, who else? Not Aches. Pharaoh, you've been wanting to come back.
Yeah,
Like,
and one thing I did want to point out, since you had mentioned Farrell wasn't playing in like pro matches, he has been playing in the CDC, the Challengers League.
yes, and
He
he's
was
also
he was
been
at Minnesota. He was at Minnesota. I don't know. I imagine he was probably at Atlanta. I wasn't at that event, so I wouldn't know. But he has been competing and he has been looking good in the challenger scene.
I mean, I don't think Pharaoh should not be in the CDL. Like that was what I was trying to say. I was just trying to
Yeah,
say like I mean, yeah, obviously there needs to be a change in optic. But I mean, they had a good tournament and I'm glad that, the battle for LA was in favor of truly the better team. So,
yeah. No one's cheering for the Gorillas. Honestly, I know I mentioned that CDL teams should make their franchise in other places besides California. But even more so now, the Gorillas, honestly, I would say screwed themselves by franchising in California when the other team there is Optic.
yeah, like
You're not gonna have any fans.
it's not
It
even
doesn't matter who you pick up or what brand you're trying to create. You're never gonna have any fans because the team you're competing against is Optic.
yeah, teams like
Even
Minnesota.
if it's Immortals Optic, it's still that logo.
Yeah, I was about to say like they lost fans, yes, but they didn't really lose fans. Like
They never
there's
had
they
fans to begin with,
Optic?
outside of maybe some Aches followers.
No,
That's about it.
no, I'm not talking about the Gorilla. I'm talking about Optic.
Oh, you're talking about Optic,
Optic
yeah.
lost some fans whenever like all of this stuff happened, but I mean, I still think they're probably still the biggest fan base. Honestly, I would argue that
No,
Optic
I would say Huntsman. I would say
is
Huntsman. I would say they're
probably
probably
Huntsman.
fourth biggest. Fourth. They're in the top four fan bases with Huntsman at the top.
Yeah,
Simply based on kind of what I've been seeing at events.
that's well, okay. So aside from London, because that was kind of that's not gonna happen again.
Yeah,
So
I'm talking about what I saw at Minnesota. Obviously, Chicago's a lot closer to Minnesota than LA is. We didn't see Chicago at this event, probably for good reason. Why are you going to invite the old ownership and the old Optic to your event? You're not like, it would have been very interesting to see Chicago at that event and have them go up against Optic Gaming.
Yeah, they probably would
because
have smoked
I
them.
would have loved to see who was getting cheers. And I would bet $100 Chicago would be getting more cheers.
Yeah, I think that's important. You know, we talk about fan base and everything. It's the whole reason why Optic was able to be Optic was because, I mean, just fan base. It's really all it is.
Yeah. And
Um,
and other teams are getting good regional fans.
that's what I'm
I mean, you
saying.
just look at Minnesota. It's just that I think the Huntsmen are, since their old optic, is one of those groups that kind of transcends the regional fan base.
I like
Kind
I
of like how you have people in China with Kobe jerseys or LeBron jerseys. There's just certain people and certain teams that transcend the regional market.
yeah,
And I think
I
the
agree.
Huntsmen are one of them.
I think you're trying to say what I've been saying, which is LA Gorillas need to just get out. Like, sorry, you know, it's
Relocate.
relocate. You'll get a fan base at least somewhere, as long as you aren't like dumb with it. Columbus,
Yeah, just don't
come to
come to
Columbus.
Ohio. Honestly, I don't want to have
What?
to cheer for the Gorillas. So
They
stay out
wouldn't
of Ohio.
like it's
Bring in
there's
a
no
bring in a
eggs
new
anymore.
team. Bring in a new team.
I think that I would be happy with it. I mean, as a Browns fan, like I'm fine with having a subpar team as long as they're my team. You know, I want a team here. So
I want a team here. I just don't want it to be the Gorillas, to
it's
be
good.
honest.
If there's any team that's gonna move, it's gonna be the Gorillas.
Moving on to our next series, though, which has the Gorillas. Sorry to cut you off there, but
Oh, you're good.
have to keep it moving.
No, it's
We
all good.
had the LA Gorillas versus the Seattle Surge, and this was a blowout.
Yeah,
That's really all you can say.
I
Hard point, it was a 3-0, 250 to 79. I think that's the first 100-point club we've seen all year. Gunrunner, S&D, 6-1. Hackney Dom, 170 to 131. They didn't stand a chance. I don't know if they were just absolutely deflated after that optic series or if they're just that bad.
they're just that bad.
And this roster, they brought in 3 new players when realistically they only needed to bring in 1, maybe 2. I think honestly, if you kept Lacefield on this roster, it would have been fine. I think Lacefield's a decent player. I think you would you would rather keep him here than bring in 3 new players instantly with very little practice time. Honestly, it was literally just Aches looked like crap and is not a good player or hasn't looked like a good player for I don't know how long now. People can say he looked good in World War II, but honestly, not really. At
Well,
least not all year.
yeah, I was about to
And
say whenever he
then
was playing Optic, he looked good.
the only other player honestly, I probably would have also taken Saints out simply for his communication and probably his mindset within the team, kind of his vibes. Honestly, I hate to use that word. I haven't used it a lot, so I'm going to use it now. But Saints isn't a very vibey player, probably with all of the young talent that you'd be bringing in. So that's what I would have liked to see instead of pretty much a full rehaul. But I guess maybe Lacefield was like complaining. I don't know. That's what I'm assuming. That's probably why they kicked him out. But even though pretty much the Gorillas looked like crap and were crap this weekend, the 2 players that they kept on the roster looked really good or looked pretty good compared
Yeah,
to what they have been doing.
I was about to
At least compared to like the rest of the guys on the team, Aqua and Decimate looked like the best players on the team. So, but that's not saying much when you look at kind of the stat lines of the other 3. This was a good look for Seattle Surge, and it was kind of their only good look on the weekend, to be honest.
when they were also
So,
playing probably the second worst team at this event. I mean, the subliners were just
yeah,
bad.
so
Like,
it, yeah. Yeah, I would say the Gorillas were probably worse than the Subliners. Subliners, at least some of their games looked pretty close, but outside of like that optic series for the Gorillas, this was a complete blowout. Honestly, I would put Gorillas below Subliners for this weekend, and then probably Surge at third, right in there. But moving on to our first semifinal matchup, we had the Dallas Empire versus the Florida Mutineers. A relatively close series, I would say. It was a 3-0 for Dallas, but the first hard point was 250 to 213, relatively close. The S&D was 6-4, relatively close. The domination was very close. It was a 159 to 152. So I would say a really good look for Florida, barring that they had to sub in Farrell last minute. And Farrell actually looked really good in this matchup against Optic, or not Optic, against Dallas. His overall KD in this matchup versus Dallas was a 1.15. Pretty darn good. Skies was an incredible. Oh wait, that was hard point. Where's his overall? His overall KD against Dallas was 0.97. Still pretty good.
Yeah, that's
Skies was a 1.54. Absolutely ludicrous. And then the rest of the team, you had Frosty and Havoc around a 0.9, and then Mox was at a 0.73. So that's kind of like what I'm getting at. I don't know if you want to keep the Mox Havoc duo synergy together when you get Pristini back, or if you want to sub out Mox for Pharaoh, because Mox is playing that flex role, and I believe Pharaoh's also a flex. I don't know. Mox is probably a better AR than Pharaoh, but since most of the maps are favoring an MP5, you're still in the MP5 meta, and I think Pharaoh is vastly better than Mox with that weapon. You may just want to sub that out. And I don't know if you can sub Mox in and out for the AR maps, but that if that's something you can do, that might be the look for Florida. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't a semifinal. That was to get into the
Yeah, I was about
semifinals.
to, that was the get in the semifinals. I think that this would have gone way differently if Brasini was there, but like I said, I'm not too disappointed in how Florida performed. And I mean, Dallas deserved it. They just wanted it more. I think Dallas. That's the theme of LA is Dallas wanted it more.
Dallas was hungry. They were craving the W, the championship. Moving on to our next qualifier matchup, we had the Rocker versus the Seattle Surge, and this was a swift 3-0 for the Minnesota Rocker. I don't know if Seattle just used all their slang power in that Gorillas series, but the hard point wasn't close. The S&D wasn't close. The domination was close. But that was about it. So I don't really have anything else to say outside of, wow, I just looked at those hardpoint KDs for the Rocker in that series. Holy cow, that is crazy. The lowest KD was ASIM at a 1.11.
Yeah, they played like, oh my gosh, such a great.
They played like a bunch of Vikings.
They they were unreal. They're all over the map. Like that series was awesome to watch because Rocker just went around and was just like, yep, nope, mine. Oh nope, mine. Like they could have honestly all just been ego challenging everything and would have been very very successful at that, and it would have been even more of a blowout. That was a great map. I'm pretty high on Rocker after this event. They formed pretty consistently throughout season, barring a couple slip ups in key moments. But I mean, I'm pretty happy with Rocker.
Yeah. Moving on to now our first semifinal match, we had the Dallas Empire versus Optic Gaming LA. The first hard point went to Optic, 250 to 172, so not really all that close. Pretty convincing for Optic there. And at this point, I was like, is Optic actually going to make it to the finals? And then Dallas was like, nah, we were just kidding you. They took the S&D convincingly 6-2. They had a close domination that was 160 to 156, and then they took a relatively convincing Ramaza hardpoint 250 to 204. So this was the series where the Optic Gaming magic fell away, and Dallas decided it's our time.
That's really all it is. I mean, at the end of the day, this whole tournament was Dallas wanted it more.
Yeah, and looking at the overall KDs for this match, it's somewhat interesting. You had Slasher at a 1.21, and then everyone else on Optic LA was between a 0.93 and a 0.96. Where on Dallas's side, you had Clayster at a 1.2, Shotzi showing up at a 1.41, and then you had Crimsix at a 0.77, Hook at a 0.82, and Illy at a 0.9. So you had two players showing up for Dallas in this series, whereas you kind of had everyone on Optic kind of putting in a performance or
just
putting in
clocking
a
in.
performance,
You know,
doing decent.
do
Like I don't really know how to word that,
they're
but
doing
I think that kind of
okay.
goes back to the earlier point of Optic LA's kind of teamwork and what we saw with their stat line of them all being around or in the upper echelon of the true engagement success rate.
Yeah.
So
I will say that this is still kind of evidence that the monkey is still not off of Crimsix's back. Yeah, he beat Optic, but I mean, they kind of beat up on him. So there's still all that drama that goes into it.
oh,
And
I misspoke again. I was looking at the hardpoint KD.
what did Crim pull?
I keep on looking at the hardpoint KDs because it's the first one I see. But yes, everyone on Optic was around what I said they were. You had 4 players above a 1.0 on Dallas, but your point still stands, so you're not wrong. Crimsix was at a 0.81.
And I think that that's
And
just
that's all that matters. Your point still stands.
yeah. I mean, I do think that Crimsix still doesn't have the monkey off of his back. He still can't get over the fact that he got dismissed from Optic by TJ Haley. I mean, if we're gonna go ahead and
Yeah, I
call it
mean
for
that
what it
wouldn't
is.
sit well with that honestly wouldn't sit well with me either too much.
No, but the thing is that he just needs to grow up about it and move on. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, yeah, it doesn't matter how you feel about how it sits with you or not. If you're out trying to win rings and everything, which they were, you don't need to be focused on this kind of stuff. And I think Crimsix is a good player. He just needs to stop focusing on these dumb things. It's Optic and it's Chicago. It's the same thing every single time. He plays great in all these events. He sees Optic. He tucks his tail. He sees Chicago. He tucks his tail. He doesn't remember how to hold his controller right. I don't know what it is, but he just
Yeah, and maybe the win here will do something for him. It's kind of just like, all right, yeah, screw you, I beat you, moving on with my life.
hard to say.
You screwed up. And honestly, like, I, I don't even know why he would have that mindset going against Optic. Like, you can already see they've made pretty bad decisions, at least up until this point, since going into this event, they were the only team with 0 wins. So
Yeah, true.
moving on to an incredibly exciting match, though, was the rematch from Atlanta. It was the Minnesota Rocker versus the Atlanta FaZe. And this time, Minnesota took it 3-2. Every single match was incredibly close outside of the domination that FaZe took quite handedly. It was a 180-130. And then that Piccadilly S&D, it was another 6-2 for Rocker, and that was what won them the series.
And
Honestly, I think FaZe needs to start banning Piccadilly Search against Rocker. I don't know what they're
here's the
banning
thing,
against
though.
them. I imagine FaZe is continuously banning Ramazza S&D since they haven't played it once
They won the
throughout the
first
season.
pick they played this event, but it took like the performance that Simp had. I forgot about this. The performance that Simp had in Piccadilly Search, not this game, but the first time they played Piccadilly, this event.
The first time they played Piccadilly, it was a complete blowout. Like everyone on the team was destroying. I think
Simp was
like
on like a 10 kill streak with a sniper. He
yeah.
couldn't miss.
Well, I mean, God RX couldn't miss, dude. Did you see his sniper?
Yeah, no,
Holy
God
cow!
Rax
And
was unbelievable.
I can't remember if I said this like in the first podcast, but I think I said I was very high on God RX going into this year since I think he was an undervalued player last year, and I expected him to be on a top roster going into this season.
Yeah,
And
he's a
he
slayer
has
too.
looked so good, so good, so good, so good.
Yeah, he
Honestly,
sniped the
most of
lights out on
Minnesota
Simp.
has. Like the only players that haven't looked insane is Silly and Asim, but they're doing their job. Like they're doing what they should be doing. And even if it doesn't like their KDs are bad, as long as the team is winning and they're doing their job, I'm not going to harp on them. Yeah, Asim could probably play a little bit better and this team would be really good, like probably top 2 or maybe even first if like Asim ups his game just a little bit.
They're so close. You're not wrong. They're so close.
So close.
And
And
yeah, this was definitely the event they needed. It's unfortunate that they weren't able to take it all after beat.
Spoilers, man. We aren't to the grand finals yet.
Okay,
But
true, true. We
yeah,
aren't there yet for anybody who
yes.
hasn't watched
I
this
I, I
yet.
do want to talk about this series a little bit more because the fourth dom or the fourth dom, the game four, the hard point
Yeah.
was 247 to 250. It was so close, and if FaZe needed that to win the series, and I don't know if maybe I don't want to say that threw them off, like they were so close and then they lost it. I mean, you had Celium in the last seconds of that hard point go on like a 9 spree. He was doing it all. He was killing everyone in that hill and they couldn't get in. And honestly, I want to I think they would have won it if they hadn't left the hill early. I think they would have gotten the last 3 points. It looked like they might have ended at 249, but sometimes I know that even if like you get in the hill, maybe with at like 2.8 seconds, I don't know if they got it exactly. Honestly, I'd have to go back and watch it frame by frame.
It's
But
it,
sometimes you get that extra second, even if a full second hasn't passed. I feel
yeah, it
I feel like I've seen that a couple of times in hard points that at least I've played. And so I honestly think if they had stuck to the hill instead of leaving it and rotating with those like last 2 point whatever seconds left, I think they might have won that Ramasa hard point.
it's hard to make that decision, and you
It's
mean
hard to make that decision, but in this game, it's so difficult to break hills. And yes, FaZe is the best team at breaking hill setups. But honestly, I might have just risked it. I mean, you're already pretty behind on the rotation to the first hard point to break it, and Minnesota only needed to hold it for like 13 or so seconds. So even if you like honestly, because you could just have 4 people rotate and leave the one dude in the hill.
no, you're not wrong. What they should have done was they definitely should have chalked the last hill and then rotated a new, or they should have been ready to break new as soon as it went live. But
I
um
think they thought that like they were fighting for that last hard point or the second to last hard point, I guess, in the match so hard because they thought they could win off of it that they probably didn't. I mean, you had Celium going on a 9 spree. Like, honestly, it should have ended. It was actually absurd that Minnesota was able to get enough bodies into the hill throughout that to even stop the clock long enough for FaZe not to be able to win, in my opinion. So
yeah, I
I
mean,
imagine they probably had at least 1 or 2 players rotating to the new hill. But yeah, that's one that they're probably going to look back at and be like, yeah, we could have done that in the heat of the moment, but you need to be on a whole nother level of composure to
and
be able to do all those calculations in a split
I
second.
don't think this
So,
loss that FaZe has is that detrimental to how
oh
good of a
no,
team I
definitely
think
not.
FaZe is. Yeah, they're
No,
beatable.
FaZe. I would still consider FaZe the top team of the game. I think
Yeah,
Minnesota is simply just a bad matchup for FaZe because of their play style.
yeah,
They have two. They usually do. They usually play 2 AR maps with Goddard X and Assault, who are insanely good. Then you have Alex wreaking havoc and Silly and Asim running in the face of the FaZe Atlanta team.
yeah. Um,
And I think that is probably what some teams may want to look at to beat this FaZe lineup. I don't know if everyone can pull it off, or if it's just simply because of like Rocker's teamwork and the players that they have and the skill of those players. But I definitely think after this weekend, you need to look at this series as kind of a marquee matchup because it's incredibly close and competitive each time. And it's really good each time. And I think it will probably be like a 50-50 series the majority of the time. Maybe FaZe can start taking it, at least if they probably. I honestly, FaZe should probably get rid of Piccadilly. Rockers looked really good on it against FaZe specifically. And I don't know if they've played it in any of their other series. I'm going to check really quick. They played Piccadilly against the Gorillas and then Atlanta. And that's it. They've only played Piccadilly 3 times, and twice it was against Atlanta. It doesn't. They've played Ramaz once against OGLA, or and against they played against Toronto, and they lost it both times. So I don't know which team's banning which map. Honestly, I thought that Minnesota was probably banning Petro, since I believe that's probably FaZe's one of FaZe's best maps outside of Arklov.
Yeah,
But maybe
it's
they're banning Ramazda. I mean, we haven't seen FaZe on Ramaz or Petro S&D.
that's
We've
true.
only seen them on Piccadilly Gunrunner and Peak. And they're 4-0 on Peak and 3-0 on Gunrunner, 2-2 on Piccadilly.
Maybe honestly, maybe they feel like Piccadilly's it's the weaker one of the five, but they can't ban them all. So
Yeah, actually, Minnesota probably 100% banned Arklov in this series.
yes,
There's no way they didn't.
I,
FaZe has a 24-7 round count on Piccadilly on Arklov. A 24-7 round count.
yeah, they don't
Like,
lose.
yeah, they've only dropped 7 rounds in Search and Destroy out of the 4 times they've played it, which is insane to say the least. So, and their wins on Piccadilly have been disgustingly impressive. The 2 wins they have on Piccadilly Search, they've gone 12-3 in rounds. So it's just against this Minnesota team that they seem to struggle on Piccadilly, at least from what we've seen so far. So I definitely think FaZe should ban Piccadilly if they have this rematch and try and force out a Ramaz or Petro simply to switch things
Yeah,
up,
change things
see
up.
what happens.
Yeah, I'm ready to talk about the finals.
Yeah, I am too. I think there was one other point I wanted to bring up, but I can't remember it at this point. So
Sounds good.
moving on to the grand finals, we saw the Dallas Empire versus the Minnesota Rocker, and the Rocker were so close at pulling off that reverse sweep. Oh my gosh, they were so close. Dallas went up 2-0 in the series. They had a convincing hard point of 250 to 181, a relatively close St. Petrograd S&D 6-4. The Rocker took the gun runner domination. That was also relatively close. That was 158 for the Rocker to 159 for the Empire. And a disgustingly close Hackney hard point, 250 to the Rocker, 247 to the Empire. Again, we had a 247 to 250 hard point with the Rocker. However, this time the 6-2 Game 5 S&D goes the way of the Empire. And so Empire got their first home series event, homestand event win. I'm not going to count these as championships. Honestly, get rid of all the other championships. The only thing that matters now are the rings.
True.
That's at least my opinion. But yeah, the Rocker looked incredibly good on the weekend. Dallas looked pretty good as well. FaZe honestly looked absurd outside of their one match against the Rocker. Every series they played was a 3-0 outside of the Rocker match, which when you think about it, they had 2 3-0s and then they lost 3-2 to the Rocker and they're out, which that's just how the tournaments work now. So
Yeah, it's true. And really, any team can come around and, well, not any team.
yeah,
Most teams are pretty competitive with each other, and I think that this event right here kind of proved that there's not a clearly defined this team's just gonna take it all. So I'm excited to see how players perform in Dallas since that's the next event. Speaking of, Dallas did great. I'm gonna go ahead and say that they're projected to be in the finals next event, just because it's a home event for them, and well, they're also a
well,
lot better
not really.
online
Not,
team.
yeah, not really home anymore.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the
I
thing.
saw I saw Hastro. Hastro posted a picture of their team, and it was their modem or their
Yeah,
router.
yeah, they're a bit. So Crimsix is, I think he's gonna start getting his confidence a little bit back. But this Dallas team was unbeatable online in the beginning. So
Yeah,
they're
they're
very,
definitely they haven't looked unbeatable online recently. That was just at the beginning of the game. Like I know people still say Dallas has the best connection probably, but at least what I've been hearing from like scrims and whatever, it a lot of the teams are more close now. It's more 50-50 sets or 60-40 in map counts. So
I
that's good to hear.
yeah. So yeah, hopefully Dallas doesn't just kind of take over because they have better internet, and that's obviously a lot of concerns about any of the fans. Is like, okay, now that we're doing online, how are we gonna determine hosts and internet? And All that
It
stuff.
will, I imagine it'll be a neutral host. That makes sense. I guess you could put that neutral in quotations since it does depend on distance. But all these teams have a facility. All of them have a facility. All the players should be at their facility. Now
True.
more than ever, like your matches are happening online.
True.
So you all should definitely be at the same place. And I guarantee you that whatever internet connection that your esports facility has is going to be a million times better than whatever your shoddy home internet is. So time to relocate, Formal. You're moving to Dallas or
Moving to.
Frisco or
No.
wherever they are. I don't know where
They
some of these
are.
other teams are situated, but
Yeah.
Minnesota, I'm 95% positive pretty much all of these teams, at least I would hope all of these teams have a facility for their players to practice it. And they're not just scrimming out of their apartment in rural Indiana or something.
I mean, maybe the LA Gorillas are doing that. Maybe that's their problem. So maybe they had to
Yeah, who
share a gaming facility with Optic, like all the other LA teams and
that
all the other
that would
sports.
that would be funny.
Wait your turn. It's Optic's turn, but it's been Optic's turn.
Dude, it's just slashers in the middle of a match. Aches just cuts the Ethernet cable.
That's how Aches is gonna be playing from now on. He's just gonna DDoS players. That's Aches' thing now. Yeah,
Uh,
it's memes aside. This is definitely gonna be a lot more interesting. Well, I wouldn't say a lot more interesting. I think it's gonna be a lot less interesting, and it's gonna be a lot harder to follow, in my eyes.
yeah, I don't think it'll be too bad. Honestly, I don't mind it being an online league. I mean, I'm gonna miss going to the events and stuff, but I'd rather not die. So, and I mean,
True.
it's just gonna be kind of going back to what it was for Black Ops 3, which honestly, I think potentially the best thing about this going to an online league isn't the pro league, but the challengers.
Yeah.
Like if all of those matches are online now, maybe there will finally be a stream. Like that would be amazing. Since they don't need to fly out casters to the events now, so they could probably just hit up some of the guys and throw challengers on stream.
Yeah, that'd be
Honestly,
great.
I honestly think that could be the biggest positive to come out of this is if they see how easy it would be to stream challengers, or even if challengers events are still going on, that the challengers teams could all stream them. And if all the players are doing that, you're going to see Call of Duty Modern Warfare on like Twitch or YouTube Gaming or wherever. It's going to be popping. Like I'm talking like Black Ops 2 era, Nate Shot, Scump, Big T streaming their 2Ks popping
Yeah,
potentially.
true.
Like that was some of the golden age, man. So if we get that again, that would be a huge positive. So, but time to talk about our predictions for the Dallas event. First matchup, Florida versus Toronto. I'm going to give this to Florida 3-1. I predict Berstini will probably be back by then. I would hope he'd be back, but even if he's not, I imagine they'll probably been scrimming with Farrell for a while. And they looked pretty good at Los Angeles without a lot of scrim time with Farrell. So if they get more playtime with him in some scrims, then they can only look better. So I'm going to give it to Florida 3-1 over Toronto.
Yeah, I am gonna say 3-0 Florida
You're going to
over
say
Toronto.
3-0?
I am gonna say 3-0
Okay.
over Florida Toronto. I
Toronto didn't look bad at their last event.
I'm
They
gonna
did go
say
0-2, but they
3-0.
were relatively competitive series. Also, just a note, Looney's getting subbed out for medals, is what I've heard.
I'm gonna say 3-0.
Still 3-0?
I am pretty confident that Florida's gonna come back. I still think that they're probably one of the top teams in CDL. Pristini plays. Pristini doesn't play. I still think that this is going to be a really, really good series, and I'm sure that Florida will still come out on top. But I'm pretty sure that after a few weeks, barring that this tournament still happens and all this, because every day something like another major thing happens with this. So barring that nothing else changes as far as CDL goes, then over the next 3 weeks, and Pristini comes back and plays and everything, and everybody's healthy and safe and all of that, uh, I think that I think that Florida takes this Rio pretty easily.
Okay. The next series that we have is Dallas versus the LA Gorillas, and that's a 3-0.
Rio, no discussion there.
Honestly, I feel like Dallas must have bribed someone to get that as their first matchup, because that is an easy dub
That is
in probably anyone's eyes.
GG, no re, easy mode, clap, 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 Dunskies, and that's the whole map. So that's all I got to say.
Moving on to our Group B match, our first Group B match, it's going to be the Seattle Surge versus the Paris Legion. We haven't seen Paris for an event. They weren't at LA. They didn't look amazing at Atlanta, to be honest. Kismet put up a pretty abysmal performance at that event, I would say. And so a lot of this team just depends on if he shows up. And I know we've talked about
Yeah, I was
the
about to say.
Saturday Paris versus the Sunday Paris. And so I'm not really sure where to go with this. I would like to give it to Seattle, but I'm not sure. Like, we haven't seen Paris in a while. I do still think relatively highly of Paris as a team, even though they've been really inconsistent. But I'm gonna I'm gonna give it to Seattle 3-2.
I'm giving it to Paris 3-1.
3-1?
I
Okay.
think it's about time for Paris to start deciding that they want to play Call of Duty on Saturdays. And what better place than to do it online in the safety and comfort of their facility? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the things that go into Paris not being able to adjust well to this is timing and all of that. So I think that being able to be at the facility, albeit at a different time than they normally are, to play in this event, I think it'll kind of sharpen them up, and I believe that Paris will do fine.
Yeah.
Barring
This is
barring the
one that I
whole
could definitely see going.
barring the whole like online thing where Paris is on one side of the world and Seattle is on another side of the world. So
Yeah, I don't know if Paris is going to be playing. I can't imagine they're going to be playing from Europe.
I couldn't tell you.
That just wouldn't make any sense. Yeah, there's no way Paris is playing from London, or not from London, from the UK, from Europe. There's no way they're playing from
France,
Europe. They got to be in
France,
the States
France.
at someone's facility
Paris
somewhere.
is in
But yeah,
France.
this is definitely one I could see going either way, if it was a land matchup especially. And Seattle's S&D hasn't been looking terrible. It's been looking okay, even though their win record in it's still abysmal. I'm giving them the game 5 simply because Paris's game 5 has
Trash,
been a big yikes.
trash. That's why I say 3-1 Paris.
Yeah,
They ain't going to game 5. And
definitely one that could go either way.
yeah,
And I
no,
think
definitely.
another match that could definitely go either way is Chicago versus Minnesota, which is our next Group B match. I'm giving this to Chicago 3-2. I think Chicago is still the second best team in the game. Minnesota looks incredibly good. They did lose to Dallas in an incredibly close series. We saw Chicago beat Dallas. However, we did see Chicago kind of underperform at that Atlanta event. However, at that Atlanta event, they still beat Minnesota. I think the advantage Minnesota has against Atlanta, it being a good matchup for them, I don't think that is something they have versus Chicago. I think these teams are more on equal footing in this matchup, and so for that reason, because I think Chicago's a little bit better of a team than Minnesota, I'm going to give it to Chicago 3-2.
Giving Chicago 3-0.
3-0
And
over
and
Minnesota?
and this is why Chicago's had a week to rest. They're gonna come in hot. They're gonna come in mad, and they're gonna come in ready to play. I think
You
that
think they're mad about Atlanta?
they definitely are. I 100%. In the interviews and everything, they're all disappointed. They all wanna work, and they've all been working. They've all been quiet relatively on social media, on Twitch and all of that, because they're working, they're grinding. They know that they're playing Minnesota first. This is a guaranteed match that they have. They are playing Minnesota. They know the ins and outs of Minnesota. I guarantee you they've been watching film. they've probably watched Minnesota beat FaZe I don't know how many times to just see what their tendencies are. They are ready. And I think that is massive in my eyes against this Minnesota team who, came off of a hard loss, but I also think that Chicago is a technically better team than Minnesota, and I think that's really what's going to push them over the edge. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a 3-0 because Chicago is just that much better.
Damn. I mean, I could see it going 3-1, but a 3-0. Very sure, very sure.
Very
So
sure.
you're going to be biting yourself in the butt if Minnesota takes it the other way.
Probably not. It's online. Who knows?
Yeah, I guess that is something. I mean, Minnesota's got their facility, though. Chicago has theirs, and they got that Texas internet, but you got formal over in California. So, jokes aside, though, moving on to our Group A winners round one matchup. We both have Florida versus Dallas. I'm going to give this to Dallas in a 3-1 fashion over Florida. I'm not too sure on who Florida is going to be playing in online. I know Dallas has a facility. I don't know if Florida has a facility. That's somewhat swaying me a bit. But also, I do just think Dallas is a better team than Florida. Florida looked really good at Atlanta, or at least they looked good in a couple of their matches, I would say, at Atlanta. So maybe a little bit of inconsistencies here or there. But overall, I think like the performance we have seen from Dallas day in and day out is just overall a consistently stronger team than this Florida lineup. And obviously, Florida could definitely beat Dallas if they show up on the day and hit their highest point. And Dallas is just playing at the level Dallas normally plays at. But the question is if we see that Super Saiyan Florida or if we just see a normal Florida. So for that
Um,
reason, Dallas 3-1.
I think I'm gonna say Dallas 3-2. I think that Florida's gonna put up a pretty good fight. Like I said, this is still 3 weeks out, and it's hard to tell what's gonna happen as far as roster stuff goes with Florida. A lot of that's still up in the air. I think that at Florida's best, they take it to a 3-2. I This is Dallas's event. It's their home event. Every team has performed really well. They've exceeded expectations at their home event. So it just makes sense for Dallas to do well in this and to take it 3-2 over Florida. So I think at max, best Florida still takes it 3-2. Dallas takes it.
Okay, I can see that. Moving on to our Group B winners round one, you have Paris versus Chicago. I have Seattle versus Chicago. I'm going to give this to Chicago 3-0 over Seattle.
I'm going to give it to Chicago 3-1 over Paris. While Paris is a great team and everything, Chicago is just that much better. So I'm ready to move on if you want to go ahead.
Yep. So I'm going to have Florida. No, my bad. I'm not going to have Florida. I'm going to have Toronto versus the LA Gladiators. And I do believe you will have the same since we both had Florida and Dallas winning their respective series. And I'm going to give this to Toronto 3-1. It's going to be very interesting to see this Toronto lineup without Looney since he is one of those leadership roles. And so it does seem they're going for the more skill based, slay heavy team dynamic if they are subbing in medals for him. And so it seems kind of like the LA and the Toronto teams are playing that same kind of game on bringing in this young talent, this fiery talent that's looking to make a name for themselves in this league. However, I think Toronto's talent has been way more proven throughout some of the past seasons, and LA is still kind of a bit of an unknown. And the look that we saw from them at the LA event was pretty abysmal
Yeah, it
for
was
the majority
pitiful.
of their players. And they do have a lot of time to work with those players or I guess make more roster changes. However, Toronto we didn't see at the last event, so they have even more time to prepare and have had even more time to prepare and will be preparing. And so I just have a little more faith in those players and kind of the looks that they've given us throughout the season than I do with this incredibly young, somewhat, I'm not going to say overhyped, but unknown Los Angeles team.
Yeah, Toronto takes this 3-1. I agree. I think that Toronto has definitely gotten a lot more practice, and they will have lots of time to prep against LA. LA is probably still going to be figuring it out for 3 weeks. I'm confident that in one thing, and that's probably that LA is going to make at least one roster change before this Dallas quote unquote home event. I
What
think
roster change do you think they're gonna make?
it's
Like,
it's
do you realistically see any of the players they subbed out coming back into this roster?
I couldn't tell you what LA is doing. Just like New York with Happy, I can't tell you for the life of me what LA is doing.
Happy seemed like a band-aid, and it was a small band-aid that didn't cover the problem that they were trying to resolve, or that they were it was pretty much like, so New York got slashed open with a samurai sword. They're bleeding out. They're pretty much going to die really quick, and they're like, "Okay, we got to save our lives until the doctor gets here or something," which is going to be this sub that comes in and saves the team. And they just put a band-aid over the wound instead of stitching it up.
Yeah, I don't disagree that that was probably why Happy was picked up, but the point I was trying to make was I don't know, and I can't put logic behind it.
I mean, it was a pretty illogical, in my eyes, a pretty illogical move, since they still have Zero, who I think they would have performed better with, or even Sensor, who I think they would have again performed better with. It was literally just a vibe. They wanted vibes, and that was it. And vibes aren't going to win you games. They'll make you a better team a bit, but they won't win you championships. Or in this case, it didn't win them a single series. So definitely need to make a bigger change than just bringing in some happy vibes, pun intended. I won't apologize for it.
It's fine. You
Moving
don't.
on to our Group B, losers round one. I have Paris Legion versus the Minnesota Rocker. You have Seattle versus Minnesota. I think either way this goes, I'm going to give it 3-1. Yeah, 3-1 to Minnesota.
I will also give it
They,
3-1 to Minnesota. I don't even think we really have to talk about it that much.
yeah.
Minnesota just got done with a really close finals against Dallas. Minnesota's a good team, and they're gonna continue to be a good team. Like I said, it's 3 weeks out still. I don't know how many times I'm gonna say that, but I still think Minnesota's great.
So in our next losers match, losers A round two, or Group A, losers round two, I have Florida versus the Toronto Ultra. And I believe you have the same. Yes, you do. I'm going to give this again to Florida. I'm going to give it to them 3-2, just because I could see maybe Toronto picking up some speed after a win over the LA Gorillas. Toronto, honestly, I don't think they've looked as bad as kind of where people are putting them. I could definitely see them sneaking out some matches against Florida, who's looked somewhat inconsistent. I'm not going to say as consistent as other teams, but the inconsistency has definitely been there for some players. I do think Florida will take it over Toronto in the end, though, and so that's why I'm going to say 3-2.
Yeah, I'm still really high on Florida. I'm saying they're gonna take this 3-1 over Toronto.
3-1.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just I feel like yes, Toronto has the capability to sneak like maybe like a search and destroy, even though their search hasn't been that great. They still have some search phenoms on that team. That being said, Florida also does. So it, like I said, it could be a toss up. I'm saying 3-1. Uh, I'm assuming Florida will be back to full strength. They'll make the proper roster changes and everything will be right. I'm confident that Florida is one of the best teams in CDL this year. So I'll let them win some games.
Okay. And I mean, you did give Toronto an extra map from the first time they played off. The first time in this that they would play, you gave it to Florida 3-0. So a little bit of improvement from Toronto. But moving on to our Group B losers round two, we both have Seattle versus Minnesota. Or do we? Do we both have that? No, you have Paris versus Minnesota. I have Seattle versus Minnesota.
Mm.
And I'm going to give it to Minnesota 3-1 over
Yeah,
Seattle.
I like I like do I though? Do I really like Paris losing to Minnesota on a day 2? You know what? I'm going to say that Paris wins it 3-2 over Minnesota. And here's
3-2?
Here's why.
You're putting your faith in that game 5?
I am putting it in the game
Don't
5.
forget, this isn't day 2. This is still day 1. Or no, this is day 2.
Yeah, I was
I'm
about to say
sorry.
this is day 2.
I keep on thinking that the bracket, all the semifinals, the only thing that happens on Sunday is semifinals. My bad. Yeah, so this is Sunday.
Yes, I am going to give it to him 3-2, and I am going to give it to him in a game 5, and here's why. I really do think that Paris can win game 5s, and I think that Minnesota is one of those teams that has given practice and looks to teams that they felt needed to get that, like FaZe and Chicago, for example. And I think that Paris is just not on their radar, and that's the exact type of matchup that Paris wins every time so far. Is these day 2s where people don't think they've already discounted Paris. They said, Paris is probably out of this, and they win him. And people just haven't learned yet. You can't count out Paris Legion. They are a great team, actually, phenomenal team. And while Minnesota's great and everything, they came off of a good run in Dallas. I think that they're a team that says, "Hey, Paris, yeah, we haven't really done anything with you because we don't think that you're something that we need to work on. We're focused on FaZe, we're focused on Chicago, we're focused on Dallas, and because of that, I think Paris is going to shock them."
Okay. I can definitely that is very true that against certain teams that have definitely been in the lower portion of kind of power rankings or I guess standings, Minnesota's overlooked. I think that Optic LA series was a prime example of that. And so I agree. I could definitely see Paris taking it over Minnesota for those reasons and for it being a Sunday Paris. Literally all of this relies on how much prep work Minnesota feels they need to do going into the Paris match and what Kismet looks like on the day. I think Paris live and die by Kismet. And
Yeah,
so if he shows
true,
up on Sunday, could definitely see this going 3-2 for Paris.
true.
However, if Kismet isn't there to play, they don't stand a chance. Moving on to our semifinal matchup, though, I got Dallas versus Minnesota. You got Dallas versus Paris. I got Dallas taking this 3-2 over Minnesota. It's their home event. It's online. Both teams have a facility. Dallas did beat Minnesota at LA. They did beat them at LA, and I think they can take the series again.
I have the same teams, right?
You have Dallas versus Paris.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, Dallas is home event. Sorry. I
Saying
mean,
3-1, 3-2,
hmm.
3-0,
No, definitely not a 3-0. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a close one. I think it's gonna be 3-1.
3-1.
No, I
Okay.
think it's gonna be 3-2. I think I
3-2.
think you're
Okay.
not wrong. Paris is definitely good at taking it to that game 5, but they're really inconsistent when it comes to game 5. And I think Dallas is one of those teams that they like to be in that hot seat. I think guys like Clayster wants to be in that hot seat, and they want to kind of hype their team up and get them ready.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I
I think 3-2.
3-2. Okay. Our second semifinal. This time we both have the same matchup. It's going to be a rematch from the semifinal at Atlanta. It will be the Chicago Huntsmen versus the Florida Mutineers. I got Chicago taking this 3-1 over Florida. I think Chicago are mad that they lost against Florida the last time around. I think that series where they did lose, the games where Chicago won were incredibly convincing for them. The games that they lost were incredibly close. And so I think if Chicago 100% had to go back since they were furious after losing that, went back, looked at the tape, reviewed it, and was like, okay, this is where we were screwing up. This is what our problems were. We didn't see them at the LA event, so they've had an extra week to prepare for this potential matchup. And so I definitely think in this rematch, Chicago's going to take it 3-1.
I don't think it's going to be a 3-1. I think it's going to be still a really close game. I think it's going to be a 3-2 in Chicago's favor, simply because I still think that Florida is one of the best teams out there, and I think it's going to be close. It would be like Chicago versus FaZe at this point. I would consider Florida to be one of those top tier teams that you're gonna have to fight for every single round. And I just think that Chicago's got it, and they're gonna have it. It's just a matter of how much they're gonna have to focus on.
Do you think Florida is going to be do you think Florida is a good matchup into Chicago the same way Minnesota is a good matchup into Atlanta? Do you think it's kind of one of those scenarios, or because I
Um,
mean I would put Florida and Minnesota in kind of the same tier, and so I would put Chicago and like Atlanta in a tier of their own, and
true.
I'd put Minnesota and Florida just a tier below them. But I could definitely see like any of the like I'll say Atlanta, Chicago S tier, Minnesota, Florida, and some other teams A tier. But I could definitely see like A tiers beating S tiers every now and then. But I think like for some teams, the S tiers will pretty much always beat the A tier. But I think for some of the matchups, going to be a lot closer simply based on those teams' play styles and how they match up.
I think that there's just a lot of factors that go into it, but in the end of the day, I do think that Chicago is definitely going to have a little bit of time to prep. They're going to have time to work on this and everything, and I really just do think that they're just the better team, and yes, I think they get a nice final trip here.
Okay. Well, in those finals, we both have the Dallas Empire versus the Chicago Huntsmen. The fourth time these teams will be matching up, and it's going to be at the Dallas event. I got Chicago taking this 3-2 over the Dallas Empire. Honestly, it would be somewhat nice to see Dallas take this since it is their quote unquote home event, even though it's going to be online. And but I'm going to give it to Chicago. It's going to be incredibly close. I think this is going to be a really, really good series, and I hope it's incredibly exciting. However, Dallas has not taken more than a game off of Chicago in the 3 times they've played them. It's 9-2 map count. So if they can double that map count, double their wins against Chicago, I think that's a relatively good look here.
How many
So,
times has a team beaten another team 4 times in a row?
well, during Optics Dynasty, I can guarantee you they probably crapped on a bunch of teams more than 5 times.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fair. That was a little special too, and I think the Chicago team is special for sure. There's no denying that at this point.
Yeah, it's just
It,
that it's only a matter of time with how competitive this league is until Dallas takes a series off Chicago.
but I also think that Crim Six is still not done pouting. We'll see. 3 weeks is a long time, and my answer could change, but I do think that Chicago does take this 3-2 over Dallas.
One big thing for Dallas that we actually didn't talk about though, since it was announced after we had recorded the prior podcast, was Rambo Ray's a coach for them.
Yep.
Dallas has a coach now. And so that like boosts my opinion of Dallas so much to like where I see them towards the end of the season and throughout the season.
True.
It at least in my like honest opinion.
I think that that's going to be a change that will be incredibly beneficial to them and will put them in the same tier as FaZe and Chicago, in the next couple events.
So who do you have coming out in this matchup, Chicago or Dallas?
Chicago 3-2. For
3-2?
now. For now.
For now. Okay. So we
Maybe
don't have too many discrepancies in our bracket. I think the only real one is I got Seattle over Paris. And then I believe you have Minnesota over whoever is, or you have Paris over Minnesota in that Group B losers round 2, where I have Minnesota over Seattle. So really only 2 differences in our bracket. So it will be interesting to see how the weekend goes. But this one's been kind of long. I do plan on recording another one to release before the event that will be a more open discussion about Call of Duty as a whole. And so I think in that one, that is the episode. 100%. That is the one we're going to do the new power rankings for the
yes.
teams.
Let's
100% that's the one we're going to do it
100%.
in.
We will do it, I promise, but it is not this episode. So stay
Yeah.
tuned. Oh my gosh.
For next week.
For next
Stay
week.
tuned for next week. That's
Stay
what, keep
tuned
your
for
eyes
next
out
week.
for that one. I'm gonna try and get a special guest for that episode. So it's gonna be me, Hubris, and one other person. So should be really good. But that is all for this episode. I hope you all have a lovely week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, and don't forget to like the video if you like the video, and subscribe to Old Shady Bacon's channel if you haven't done that yet. And appreciate it. And I think that's a wrap.
Best way to handle is just go find a private island and make a garden.
I don't know about that.
What?
Go to a private island. That sounds expensive.
Huh? No, you just get stranded in the middle of the ocean, hope you find land, and just have some like seeds with you, plant them, grow some crops, and just live there the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, like that's still like a huge investment to buy a private island. Also, to
You're
get
not
to a private
buying it. I
island,
said you were finding a private island.
that's also like, I mean, you realize how hard it is to, like, navigate oceans? Like, how much sailing experience do you have?
Oh, none.
What kind of boat do you have?
I'll either die or I'll find an island. It's more of an ultimatum,
I
really.
I think this is bad. By the way, we're recording.
It's definitely going at the end.